Welcome to the third episode of the Solo Moviegoers Club. Okay, take two. Welcome to the third episode of the Solo Moviegoers Club. This is a podcast in which me, Sean, and my daughter Kaya watch a movie within 24 hours of each other in a theater. We both have to watch the movie alone. We are not allowed to talk to anyone about it. We are not allowed to read any reviews, and we are not allowed to talk to each other about it until we meet on this podcast. So the idea is we go into the movie as blind as possible, and we come to this podcast as blind as possible. We tell each other and you guys what we thought about the movie. And then at the end of this, we'll read some professional reviews and some user submitted or fan submitted reviews. Although we'll also discuss what's the difference between those two at this point, because I think that world is changing. But anyway, today is our first documentary that we've seen, which is very exciting. It happened earlier in this process than I thought it would. And this is also the first movie that Kaya recommended. So Kaya, why don't you take it from here? Tell everybody what we saw and what it is.
So we saw One Hand Clapping. And before we get started, I love documentaries. That's something that I find myself gravitating towards watching, which I feel like will be a theme for this episode. But One Hand Clapping kind of follows Paul, Linda, the Wings. I didn't really know exactly what this would be about. I anticipated it being a lot like the Get Back documentary that came out a couple of years ago. That was really good. But yeah, I was just really excited to see a different side of Paul because I love the Beatles. I'm a big Ringo fan. I don't know as much about Paul. I know a lot, but this was a really fun kind of concept for, I think, us to watch. So that's a little bit of an intro.
Yeah, I think it was fun too. So a couple of things. I really went into this blind. I knew
Really?
I knew that it was about Paul McCartney and Wings, and that's it. I didn't know anything else about it. I also don't know that much about Wings. I'm very much a Wings novice. I know their hits, right? I know Live and Let Die.
Yeah. I remember I would ask you about them when I was little. It's so confusing to me, the band members who have came in and come out, and there's so much history and lore with Wings. So I wanted to see it.
And this did. I think this movie. So just to give a basic, I have to say one thing. I was late to this movie.
Really?
And this is the worst movie imaginable to be late to, which I realized partway. Not only that, but it's a kind of an experimental format. So I have a question for you. I'll tell you exactly. Well, first, let me tell you the circumstances under which I end up late to this movie.
Okay.
Are that I'm on a Zoom where I can talk about this because it's a movie podcast. We were raising money for a movie, and we had a call with an investor, and it was going really, really, really well. But the guy was super engaged, and we were in super deep. And I planned on taking the second half of the call from the car, and I couldn't do it. I had to stay on. I was locked in with this guy, and so I'm leaving late. Mumsy, who is Kaya's mom, my wife, she had bought me a wrap or something while I was on the Zoom so that I could eat on the road. And Kaya knows this. It's really hard for me to eat without getting something on myself. And or just on myself in general. And so I'm driving to the movie, sort of stressed because I'm going to be late, knowing I'm late, and eating this wrap and not realizing while eating this wrap that it had Chipotle mayo in it that was not even dripping, but like a steady stream of fluids out of the wrap onto my clothes, onto my shirt, onto my pants, onto my car, onto everything. So I rolled up into this movie like an absolute disaster, covered in food, late. I roll in there, and having not known what to expect or really what the movie was, I just roll in and see Paul McCartney goofing around on a piano, and I came in at the song Suicide.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I
It was
missed.
a good part.
It was a good part, but I realized in the credits that I missed Maybe I'm Amazed, which I would have loved to see. And then so here's my take on this, and I want you to fill in the gaps, and you can tell everybody what the beginning of the movie was. So there's a part later on in the movie where, in the movies, if you've seen Get Back, then you're familiar with kind of what the general format of what this documentary is, which is that there aren't any talking heads. There's occasionally you might hear some color commentary from Paul or one of the band members, but
Yeah.
mostly it's just seeing their recording process and seeing them play these songs that you know and love. And I didn't know a lot of the songs, and now it makes me
Mhm.
want to go back and listen to them. But when I was seeing the songs that I knew and loved, it was like so incredible just to see what it was like to watch those songs be recorded. But then there's a moment where modern Paul appears on the screen and he's talking to
Yeah.
the audience. Did that
He did at the
happen
beginning as
earlier?
well. Yeah.
I guess that. Okay, so
Yeah.
tell me what happened prior to the song Suicide.
Um, did you see the orchestra?
I saw the orchestra.
Okay. Pretty much it was just the beginning start of that. Like Paul mentioned, I loved the beginning part actually because when Paul, modern day Paul, was kind of explaining what this was, he went into depth a little bit about like the people who have now like passed away, like obviously his wife and the band members, and they were showing like Polaroid photos that were really cool. And it was like you missed the song, is it Jet or is it Jets?
Jet.
Yeah, you missed that. Was so good. That like I have recently gone down a Paul McCartney and the Wings rabbit hole, so I was familiar with all of the songs. Um but yeah, like that's what you missed. You missed a little bit of Linda speaking, which I thought was really nice. Because like I feel like she was kind of really behind the scenes, and she also got a lot of criticism from just like not being like a super successful, talented backup singer, keyboardist, whatever, because like sometimes you can't hear her, but in this you really could. And that was fun to see. And like the reason why she was never a musician, like she wanted to do this with Paul so that they could be together all the time. So yeah, it was that. And I also love the fashion. Like the fashion of it all, I was thinking about it the whole time. They were all dressed so well. Like there's something about 70s makeup, hair. They were all like so well put together. Like I feel like now people would just be in sweats recording.
Also, everyone in 70s footage is sweating all the time.
Yes.
I think it's because of the lights.
You think?
Yeah, I imagine it's all shot on film, and they had
Yeah.
the light. Like you have to have serious light. You don't have these stupid ring lights that we have on our laptops. They had like real lights.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that because the whole time I was thinking about that, I was like, wow, it's like really tiring to play an instrument.
Well, I also think that there was probably no air conditioning, because there's probably no way to air condition in a way that didn't disrupt the sound recording process. Like even still to this day, at most sound stages for movies, when you film, you have to turn the air off while you're rolling.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's too loud. So that might have been part of it too. But yeah, I just love the fact that everyone in all 70s film is just sweating profusely the whole time, which gives them a really nice glisten to their skin.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wondering if Paul spoke at the beginning. So I walked in, and having not known what to expect, I'm just like thrust into this recording process of their songs.
Yeah.
And it was maybe like 5 minutes went by before anybody spoke. And the first person to speak was the drummer. And having not seen any sort of intro, why was the drummer wearing a karate gi the whole time and like doing karate kicks? Did they ever explain that?
I think it was a silly thing. It was just like a little bit of an interlude. I think the drummer was my favorite part of the whole thing.
He seemed like a real character.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing was silly, and there's a moment where, and I hadn't realized this, obviously I knew Wings music was very different from the Beatles music. It was very different from some of the other music that Paul McCartney has recorded solo, and it's all over the map. Like the Wings music is almost like Jet does not sound like the same band as Live and Let Die, does not sound like the same band as Band on the Run. Like Band on the Run doesn't even sound like the same band or the same song at 3 different points in the song. And so you get to see like that was what was so brilliant about this documentary to me. By the way, I really liked it.
Me too.
But I was very confused at the beginning, and then the more I saw, the more angry I became that I missed the beginning. I'll probably go back and watch the beginning because I really loved it so much once I started watching. But the restraint they had in not using talking heads, and the little bits they used the voices underneath the footage to just give context to, I thought Paul explained Wings in like 2 sentences. And so can you hear just people and dogs?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just had a brief interruption, but we're back in now. So yeah, I thought the restraint that the filmmakers used, and by the way, Paul McCartney was executive producer of this project, and obviously he appeared on screen as current Paul, so it seems like he was pretty involved. But the restraint that the filmmakers used in how much context they gave us and their lack of use of talking heads was really impressive, and I thought really powerful, and it made the moments you did hear from them all that more meaningful. And Paul at one point said it sounded like he was responding to an interviewer's question, and he said, this is a paraphrase, but something felt like he could be trapped by being Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
But then he
talk about this.
Yeah, but then he realizes that that's actually the fun of it. And then you see him getting like weirdly experimental, and that in a moment explained what Wings was for me. It was his opportunity to spread his wings. No, it was his opportunity to just have fun and be a musician and not worry about the fact that people had expectations of Paul McCartney, but just make the music that he wanted to make.
I think that also the commentary on it was super strategic because of that. And like when they were explaining how he might not be as successful as he once was as a Beatle, it made me really like listen to the music and really hear the difference. Like there are some times when he does sound like Paul McCartney, and I think that that's really charming. But then like the times when he was silly, like at outside, the very end, he went outside of the studio and he was just recording a bunch of silly songs that he liked, and that really showed like that it's not that serious.
Yeah, the way he describes it is that he's playing as almost of it. Well, first of all, you think the movie's over. So the credits roll, and it's all the credits of the people who shot in the 70s. And I didn't see what year this actually was because I missed the very beginning. I'm sure it said what year it was, but what do you remember?
No.
We can look it up. So he then modern day Paul McCartney just shows up after the credits and says, "Stay in your seats, don't leave yet. You're about to see something really special. It's something we call the backyard tapes or the backyard film or something." And it's literally just Paul and a guitar sitting in his backyard. And he says he's going to play the songs that he loved when he was young and first getting into music, and play them almost as if he's a busker. So people are yelling out requests to him, and he's just rolling. He'll play like half a song and then just switch and roll into the next half. And you get to see him really loving the music. And what was cool about it is that Get Back, for anybody who saw Get Back, it was a 4-part series that Peter Jackson made, I think for Disney. And they used AI to piece some of these Beatles recordings together. But it was the recording process of the Beatles' final album, culminating in them playing on the roof of Apple Studios, which is the last time they would ever play live. And they hadn't toured in years prior to that. But the Get Back film was painful to watch at times because the band wasn't getting along for big portions of it. People quit and walked away in the middle and had to be convinced to come back. And you could see the strain that fame and expectations and just being in a band together for a long time had on those guys. And it was pretty rough to watch at times. But then there were these brilliant moments where you just got to see like the 4 lads from Liverpool just jamming together and having a blast like they were little kids. This movie was that the whole time.
Yeah.
It was just musicians having a blast. They weren't arguing. There weren't creative differences. They were just having fun. And there was something great about watching that. And I do have to say, from a solo movie-going experience, I was the only person alone in that theater.
Same.
Everybody else in that theater was 70 plus.
Same.
And in pairs.
Yes. Mine was a bunch. So I went last night. I went like 7:30. I had to drive all the way to Encino to the sussiest little like strip mall. I didn't know where it was. It was spooky. I didn't like it. But when I got in there, it was like groups of old people for me. It wasn't really like pairs. There were a couple of old pairs, but it was like there was a group of 6 old people like talking and laughing and conversing. And I felt safe now that I was like in the theater. But it was really sweet. I think it was a good environment to watch that movie. It was also like a theater that was super old, not redone, the like gross black leather seats that like they kind of just rock. They don't like go back or anything.
Oh, the only kind of seats that existed when I was a kid seeing
Yeah,
movies.
yeah. So,
It was pretty wild. It was exclusively pairs of old people, and they were very vocal throughout the
hmm
movie. People
yeah.
were talking, people were laughing. Everybody
More
clapped at the
cheers.
end, which in
Yes.
LA, everybody claps at the end of movies. In Michigan, people typically don't
They were
clap at the end
clapping
of
in the
movies.
middle, like after a song. It
And
was crazy.
and then they were all talking after the movie. People were like, oh, that was such a good time. And
Yes.
they said they were having a hard time not singing during the movie. And you
Yeah.
get to see all these people go back to their youth and have this really
hmm
nostalgic experience. But it was, which is funny because there's moments in the movie itself where Paul is having a
hmm
nostalgic experience. And he talks too, which this got a big laugh in the theater. He said when he was young, he thought when he was 25, it was all over. And then when he was
hmm
25, he said, well, maybe it'll be 35. When he was 35, maybe it'll be 45.
hmm
And now he just thinks that this feeling of, I guess, youth and creation will go on forever.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to, I don't know how old he was when they were recorded. Did you look up what year?
It's 1974.
1974. So how old would he have been?
He's like 80 now. Good
We can look
question.
this up.
I loved how it felt almost like an interlude sort of situation when he was solo playing songs that he wrote when he was like a teenager and super young and starting out, like the Suicide song, and there were a couple of other songs that he sang, and it was just super silly, and you could see like just kind of how his songwriting has progressed. And he also explained a lot about how he used to write music, like putting the notes over each song. And it really made me like admire that because I don't know, I used to like play instruments all the time. I've never written any music or songs or anything. And just like the way that he was explaining it was so mesmerizing. And then he would also talk about how he would write songs for other people and he would like do it in very different ways for them to help them. So I don't know.
Yeah, and so when the orchestra showed up for Live and Let Die,
The conductor with his smoking his cigarette was the best part. Very
yeah,
good.
very 70s.
Yeah.
But do you think that orchestra always shows up in tuxedos to their recording sessions?
I have no idea, but I loved that they showed different people in the orchestra and they were like eating, falling asleep. Like it was very funny. Like clearly they have had such a long day recording. That was like the last take, obviously.
And it was a huge orchestra, maybe 36
Huge.
people or
I
something,
don't know how they fit.
all in tuxedos.
Yeah.
And were they there in tuxedos because it was Paul McCartney, because they knew they were filming? Also, how many cameras were filming all of this? And
I
did
was
Paul
thinking about
know
that
he wanted to
too.
make a documentary?
He did. So at the beginning he explained that the director was one of his friends and he picked him specifically just because he knew that like he kind of had it down and he wanted to tell the story and just have something to look back at. And that's why they also chose Abbey Road Studios to film it at. He's like, it's always the best sound. Like you can't go wrong there. So like they very much planned this. I was interested the whole time. They had so many different angles, how many cameras they had, because it was one guy.
Yeah, and wow, so one guy, just the director was the camera operator.
Yeah.
Interesting. But yeah, it was great. It was so much fun. It was so short.
It was
But
very short. I
as
wish it was longer.
me too, as compared to Get Back, which was long
Very
but also
long.
fascinating,
Mhm.
and very similar formats, except
Yeah.
for the interjections of contemporary Paul, and then the backyard thing at the end, which was just so cool. He was playing Buddy Holly songs.
Yeah.
He was playing just the songs of his own youth, just a guy with a guitar, and he was so good. Like you really get to see how great of a musician Paul McCartney is. And it's like you said this, there's one song in particular, I don't know the name of it, where he's kind of screaming.
Mhm.
And it doesn't even, like, you would never think that is the same musician as Paul McCartney from the Beatles.
Yeah. He has a like crazy range.
This was interesting that you decided to see a documentary this week, because this was a big doc week for us.
Yeah. We have been watching a lot, recommending each other a lot. So
It all started a week ago when you recommended it on a Friday night that I start watching Chimp Crazy, which I
literally,
proceeded to watch till 4 in the morning.
I watched it all in one day. I don't do that. I haven't binged a show, a series, a movie, like thing. Oh my God. It was way too good to stop.
It was very good, but there's controversy that came out of it, which is
You want to explain?
I am recommending to Kaya that she watch the movie Magnolia. She's never seen it, and she is balking at the fact that it's 3 hours long. And
Hmm.
she said she would never watch a 3 hour movie in a theater, yet she can sit on her couch and binge watch a 4 hour documentary series. How does
It's
this make any
different.
sense?
I'm really okay with watching long documentaries. I don't know why. Movies, I don't.
What if it wasn't a documentary series? What if it was just a straight up 4 hour documentary?
I would watch it. I think I would be able to watch that because I could there's like there's a point to a documentary. I feel like there's some sort of satisfaction that I get out of it from learning a story that's real. I don't know.
What about movies that are based in historical fact?
Um I mean, I could like Napoleon I watched, although it's incredibly inaccurate. And that was fine, but still like it's not the same.
I thought you were going to say Napoleon Dynamite.
No, that's the best though. I can sit through that.
Yeah, and so Chimp Crazy is wild. Not that this is a
Legit.
indeed, not that this is a Chimp Crazy episode. This is the one hand clapping episode, but I feel like since we're on the documentary topic, we can talk about other documentaries that we saw in the past
Alone.
7 days.
Yeah, I've seen four.
And Alone. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I have to hear about the others, but so we both watched Chimp Crazy alone. What is the difference between watching a movie or a series at home versus alone at home versus alone at the theater?
I think all in all, it's the atmosphere. I don't know, I just like sitting in a theater and like you're really big on like screen size. I feel like that's like a thing for like your generation. Like, oh, why are you watching that on your computer? Why are you watching that on your phone? Like, I'm fine with watching things on my phone. Um, but there's something about going to the theater that is exciting.
I like to not be distracted.
I don't like to be at home. Like I like to be out of my house. So it's like a good medium where I don't have to be like doing so much and being so active. Like if I actually want like to rest and like have like a chill day, but I don't want to be at home, I'll go to a movie.
So, speaking of yes, that too, and also yeah, just not it's so easy to be distracted when watching something alone at home. Like
Yeah, I hate that.
you get an email or a text message or a phone call, and then you're just looking at your phone, and then you have to rewind whatever you were watching because you've lost the thread, and that doesn't happen at the movie theater because you
Yeah.
can't look at your phone, or you shouldn't. If you do, you should be thrown out.
Hmm.
But the you mentioned screen size, so this week I was actually at an IMAX conference, a giant screen cinema conference, like learning about the art of IMAX and the business of IMAX because I'm making my first giant screen documentary. And so I watched a bunch of giant screen movies, IMAX movies in an IMAX theater.
Hmm.
And that is a totally different way of watching movies and making movies, like because you make it for the screen size. Like there's
Hmm.
so much happening on those frames, and they even edit the movies slower, so because you watch, your eye wanders around because you're looking at this giant canvas, and it is absolutely more immersive. So I do think sometimes I think the same. Sometimes there are times where I'll get in a habit at night or something of watching movies on my iPad,
Hmm.
and the TV's right over there. Like I could just
Yeah.
move and walk over to the TV,
Yeah.
and I'll watch it on my iPad. And I think post giant screen conference, I definitely won't do that anymore. Like I think it really did. It did, and IMAX is different. Obviously, the aspect ratio is different. It's a whole sensory experience. But I do think screen size absolutely impacts the immersiveness of the viewing experience.
Also sound. I was at like a janky theater, but I still felt like the sound for one hand clapping was amazing. Like you could hear it in different speakers, and that aspect alone does a lot for me personally.
Yeah, I think a music documentary is really aided by a theatrical experience. And also, it was cool. You could hear things, especially when he's in the backyard sessions, like a dog barking behind you.
Yeah, I
It
love
made you
that.
it made you feel like you were there in the backyard
Mhm.
with him. And I think that's something that, I don't think a lot of people do have nice home theaters, but I don't think a lot of people have like a properly calibrated 5.1 surround sound theater in their house. I think a lot of people have
Definitely not.
really nice sound bars,
Mhm.
and that does help. It's louder, it's better. TV speakers aren't great, but it is, yeah, a music documentary. And documentaries in general, I think documentaries get, with the exception of maybe IMAX documentaries don't get the respect they deserve in terms of the theatrical experience.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, this is the great boom of at-home documentaries that streamers started. More people watch documentaries now than ever. Like, when I was young, documentaries were for IMAX Science Centers and PBS, and that was
Even
it.
when I was young, like no one watched documentaries. No one knew, no one could tell me a documentary that they have ever seen. I felt like,
Right, it's like the first couple that really broke through in outside of the art house, but in like a true commercial sense, were like Bowling for Columbine, Fahrenheit 9/11, Super Size Me,
yeah,
and those are all interestingly very personality driven documentaries. It's the filmmaker
yeah,
that's
yeah.
driving it. Uh, Grizzly Man, a couple others, but even that was more on the art house side. All the Werner Herzog stuff is,
Mhm.
but yeah, like I don't. The thing is, I'm not even sure that in the streaming era, like this Netflix and streamer driven boom of so-called premium documentaries, that people really realize they're watching documentaries.
Yeah,
I think it's just TV.
yeah. I mean, it feels a little bit reality TV-y. Like I literally threw on a super random one this week called Child Star or Child Stars. Demi Lovato produced it, and she was like the interviewer with other child stars like Drew Barrymore. And to me, that didn't feel like a documentary. It just felt like normal TV, television, whatever. I don't know.
So conversely, back to Chimp Crazy,
Yeah.
I thought I was going into Chimp Crazy to watch something really tabloidy that was just going to be about these crazy chimp people
Yeah.
because it's in the title. It was
Yeah.
so cinematic.
It was beautiful. And no one will watch this. I've recommended this to everyone, and everyone thinks, oh, this doesn't look that good. It's incredible. Like, even the interview shots, the backdrops, they were so personable and like so specific to the person that they were speaking to, but like exaggerated. Like, for example, the main woman was in like a bright pink bedroom meant for like little kids. Like, there were giant bunk beds, giant like stuffed animals. It was just like super cool to watch.
And then a little spider monkey would crawl through the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting in the way that it used some of the. It was incredible. It really, like, the filmmaking of it was incredible. It used some of the language of reality TV and some of the tabloid nature of reality TV and some of the
Mhm.
shocking elements to draw an audience in, and ultimately, in a way that was extremely cinematic and really well crafted, tell a really important story
Mhm.
about the connection between humans and animals,
Yeah.
and where does responsibility lie, and what is love versus attachment and selfishness,
Mhm.
and what do we owe to these animals versus owe to ourselves, and what's the right place. And also seeing some of these people who I think they think they're doing the right thing for the animals.
Yeah.
Like, I really believe that they
That's what I thought as
believe
well.
that, but they're clearly not.
It's kind of just for their own selfish mental state.
Yeah, I think they're really damaged people.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're tangenting into Chimp Crazy, but I guess
It
that's
was
okay.
it was incredible. So,
Yeah, and then it's it's really wild. I'll be interested to read critics' reviews of One Hand Clapping, because the audience loved it and I loved it, and it
mhm.
was so interesting formally, in that it was so reserved in terms of really letting itself be just a recording studio film with then Paul McCartney interjecting himself. There's nothing else like it. I don't think other movies like this exist, which I think is so cool because it is kind of a classical, like an older, like a 1960s, what was the term? Objective cinema, where you would try not to feel the hand of the filmmaker. It was a way that they were making films to try to really put you in the world of the characters. It was from that school, but then completely broke the fourth wall by the filmmaker / subject directly addressing the audience and talking to them as the audience. That I haven't seen anything like that before. And it's just really exciting for me because I think that we are kind of just getting started with the documentary format in terms of what's possible. And I think the blending of narrative and documentary and what that could mean, I think there are some really exciting films that we will see in the future from people who grew up with documentaries being a more popularized format, combined with people who grew up with social media, where people your age are just filming themselves all the time doing things. And when that becomes, well, what is happening? There's a French influencer right now who made a film about himself going to Everest, and it became this incredibly high grossing film in France. But France has really strict cultural laws on how long a film has to be in theaters before it can be released online. And they released it in theaters and online at the same time. And so this is somebody who is like an influencer, kind of social media person first, who made something that's just supposed to be an incredible piece of cinema. But I think that I'm very, very, very excited for what the future looks like for documentaries.
Me too.
Cool. So let's see. What do you want to go to first? Professional Critics, Rotten Tomatoes, or Letterboxd?
Yeah.
Which one first?
Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
I'm opening Letterboxd though.
Okay. It only has 2 professional critic reviews?
Crazy.
How's this possible?
I don't know.
So we got Peter Bradshaw from The Guardian. There's plenty for nostalgists and completists to swoon over, and some hilarious incidentals such as drummer Jeff Britton in his karate outfit busting out some martial arts moves in a spare moment. Such a pleasure. It wasn't just a spare moment. That dude was doing karate through the whole movie. And always wearing a gi, and at one point something that looked like a kimono. And Danielle Solzman, Solzy at the Movies, says, starring Paul McCartney and Wings, One Hand Clapping has been beautifully restored and remastered. Oh, so was the 70s part of this film released already? Did Paul say that at the beginning?
What?
And I missed it?
I don't think so.
Maybe that just means the footage.
Yeah, no, they just restored the footage.
Okay. I can't believe this only has 2 professional critics reviews.
He said at the beginning that like he hadn't looked at this footage since like they started working on restoring it, and that's why he was so excited about it, because he got to see like the people in his life that passed away.
Interesting. Okay, does Letterboxd have many reviews?
Yeah, there's a ton. Someone said finally in my Eras tour.
Interesting that Letterboxd is so far ahead of the professional critics community on this one.
That's always how it is. I feel like people will get their hands on a movie and talk about it right away. Someone said, so awesome. Could have used more karate. They're all great reviews on here, like 5s and 4s.
It was really good because I was so confused when I first walked in. I was a little concerned that I wasn't going to get into it, but I was sucked in pretty quickly.
Yeah.
A rarely seen rockumentary made by Paul McCartney and his then band Wings at Abbey Road Studios in London in August 1974. The film features live performances and voiceovers, with each member talking about their musical experiences up to that point.
So I guess the backyard scene is kind of a re-release.
Okay. But the audience went nuts when that part came on. They seemed very familiar with it, so I knew there was some sort of, as you would say, lore surrounding that section.
Yeah, lots of lore.
But it was cool. I loved seeing. Like to see people have that much joy in a theater and laugh that much at something that's not a comedy was so much fun.
Yeah. Everyone's saying Paul is such a silly goose. So it made them
He's
really
he's
happy.
definitely silly goose.
Yeah. Wow. So many reviews. People crying. My mom
Yeah.
started crying on the opening notes of Maybe I'm Amazed. And
I
she
can't believe
never
I missed
stopped
that.
wiping her eyes after. That checks out.
People clapping at the end of Live and Let Die. That's my New Hope core.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What's New Hope core?
Hope core is like it's like life is worth living. Like people will put life is worth living in like a Justin Bieber song over like a bag of hot Cheetos or like a bowl of mac and cheese or like something like that.
Okay.
That's like pretty hope core, I would say. Life is worth living.
Yeah, it was definitely life affirming to see like Paul's enjoyment of creating the music and to see how much people loved watching Paul create the music and hearing these songs and probably seeing, I guess that for me, like as I said, not being a huge Wings fan, but the 3 or 4 songs that I knew, seeing those was amazing. But then seeing songs I wasn't seeing, the creation of songs I wasn't familiar with, makes me want to go listen to those songs. But that's really the experience. I wish I would have seen Get Back in a theater. I don't even know if that was in theaters.
It should have been, but I think it was during COVID.
Oh, right. I wonder if they'd ever re-release that, because can you imagine seeing that Apple Studios final concert when they on the roof?
That would be amazing. Too bad there's no way to do IMAX. Can you do IMAX of like old footage like that? The dome?
I think so. Yes, the dome.
It felt like I was at a concert when I was there.
Yeah. Wow. Should we start a movement to try to get Peter Jackson's Get Back Beatles film into IMAX theaters?
Seriously.
Are we sure it wasn't?
I don't think it was, because I thought that the whole time when I was watching it. I was like, I almost couldn't finish it because I was like, it's like not the same. The sound isn't the same.
It did. It played 70 IMAX theaters to nearly sell out crowds.
Were we near that?
We were just we just slept on it, apparently.
Wow.
Because it happened. Oh, there was a special theatrical version of it. It was a 60-minute IMAX film which featured roughly the 45-minute concert in its entirety. If they ever re-release that, I am so there. Yeah, it was released on Disney Plus over Thanksgiving. That's what I did. I watched it over Thanksgiving weekend on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, I leave this experience and kind of our whole week of documentary binging more excited than ever about the documentary format, and specifically theatrical documentaries.
I say this all the time, but right now especially, I'm in a time of my life where I really can only stomach a documentary. Like I can't sit through anything else except for like obviously a movie that we go see in theaters. But they're just all like, every single one of them is so different and like not new footage. It's like, or whatever. It felt very alive.
It did, indeed. And so next week, this is the first time we've plotted a week in advance what we're going to see next week. And there's what we know we're going to see, and then I have a bold plan that Kaya may or may not be able to do with her busy social schedule. But we will be seeing The Substance.
Super stoked.
And we might be seeing a double feature of The Substance and My Old Ass.
I don't think I can do a double feature.
You don't have to do them back to back. You could do one day, one the next.
That's the whole point of a double feature. Like, don't call it a double feature if you're not.
It is. Okay, but we could still see both, and then we could see both movies within 24 hours, and then do the podcast on the day that we saw the second movie.
So psycho.
But I think that the movies are very different approaches to similar themes.
Really?
I think so.
You read reviews?
No, I didn't read reviews, but the tangential bits that I've picked up, just kind of through, I don't know, osmosis, the cultural osmosis, the things that I've picked up, they seem that way. I think both movies have 2 different actors playing a different aged version of the same character.
Mhm.
And someone having to face aging. Probably something more relevant to me than you.
Yeah, for sure.
So you just call me old.
Maybe a little.
Whatever. Okay. So any final thoughts on one hand clapping?
I like Paul McCartney a little bit more now. I'm a Ringo girl. What can I say? But
By the way, we're underplaying how much of a Ringo girl she is.
I
She
love
is
him.
obsessed.
I love him. Like when I learned how to read when I was like 3 or 4, and some of the first stuff that I learned how to read was biographies about the Beatles, and I was obsessed with them. I still do know everything about them, but I knew everything about them. But Ringo, I gravitated towards.
That was the best humble brag I've heard in a while. But she's not lying. She learned to read really early and weirdly, as a very young child, was weirdly obsessed with Ringo.
Weirdly, I love Ringo t-shirts.
She
Like,
had at
Mikey.
one point the only framed thing in her bedroom on her wall was a Ringo album. Which one was it? Photograph?
No, I don't even remember.
I'm sure I still have it somewhere.
Let me see what it was.
That either we still have it in our garage or it's in one of the boxes that we tell you is still in the garage that we actually threw away.
Yeah. It's Bad Boy. That's
Bad
the
Boy.
one.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Lots of Ringo paraphernalia.
Mhm.
Anyway, the dog is barking now. That tells me that it's probably time to go. But we are having an absolute blast doing this, or at least I am. And we want to keep doing this. We want to bring something that viewers can and listeners can engage with and get something out of. So we are super open to suggestions. If you want to leave comments, email us, call us, send us a fax, courier pigeon, whatever means of communication you prefer. Send us feedback. It's helpful. We want this to be entertaining and informative.
This is true.
And with that, we will see you next week with a movie about aging.
I can't wait. Woo.
That's a
Peace
wrap.
out.
Cut. It's still recording. I don't know why.
Though, like, I keep thinking you can hear my breath.
Are you trying to do like the crowd thing, or are you just breathing? Are you just like checking your own breath?
I'm doing the ASMR thing.
Oh. Oh, this doesn't work, so we have this windscreen on. Wow, okay. Wow, this is a glimpse to the real us.
Mhm.
All right, I'm trying to end it now.